Yeah, so TJ, we had originally about 15 people that were going to come in person that had officially like RSVP'd, and then another five that had texted me and said, hey, yeah, I'm going to show up, or I hope to come, or I might come late. Is it okay? And I was like, yeah, the more the merrier. I don't want to be like a super formal group. I want us to really be able to learn, grow, bounce ideas off each other. Um, and so that with the weather, as it was continuing to change here at the shore, we really got a good bit of snow here. We really got a good bit of snow, and then it wound up snowing a few more inches again last night. So it was kind of like, all right, this does not make sense. Let's still get together. Let's still collaborate, but we'll do it now this time, on Zoom with the idea to meet in person and collaborate in person, because we sometimes don't get to see each other as often as we would like to. We do a lot of cross sales together. We do inquiries with each other where we're calling and asking about each other's listings and that kind of stuff, but we don't always get to see each other. And often at the closing table, sometimes we don't even get to see each other. So I think collaborating in person is a great way for us to learn and grow. And there's always so much for us to share.
Well, I'm seeing a lot of the names of the realtors that are on here. So they seem like a lot of them are the experienced local ones, probably coming on for the structural integrity report, which is what I'm going on too. So I can just open it up to questions, because I don't think they need a boring condo project approval overview. Because for the most part, the challenges really come down to insurance and outside lenders that are looking to underwrite condos when the loan officer is not even involved in the process.
Yes. Yeah. And I want to actually, let's just give these guys like another minute or two, because real estate agents aren't the most timely individuals. Let's just give them another minute or two, and then we'll make sure that everyone is here, those that are here, because I do want to give you a nice formal introduction and a little bit of kudos to you. And then we won't make you stay here too long and be bored with us. But you'd be surprised. I've worked with some experienced agents, and sometimes it's not always bueno. So we only know what we know sometimes based upon our experiences. And as some people don't recognize, not all lenders can fund all products. And as we start to deal in the more of these funky things that are out there, I'm seeing more approvals now for buildings where we're going to have, commercial on the bottom, residential on the top. Okay, well, what does that look like? Who's going to fund that? How's Fannie and Freddie feel about that? These are things we've got to know, because when our buyers land in our lap with their rocket mortgage pre-approval, that could be a problem.
Right.
That could be a problem. And we have to have enough information now that we are contractually signing with buyers, right, and having this agreement with them. We have to know what the hell we're talking about and have to be able to really best represent them. So hopefully, getting a good lender, or at least having a conversation with a lender who at least having a conversation with a lender that can say, yeah, I can help you with this, or no, I can't help you with this. You need to pivot and go someplace else.
Right.
That is something that everyone, welcome to the Shore AHA Club meeting. I was just chatting with TJ Hildebrand, who is a friend of mine. He has personally funded loans of mine. I've called TJ and said, hey, my taxes aren't done and I want to buy a house. Can you help me? Because I don't really want to have to go through this whole messy process. And he was like, all right. And he did. So TJ has funded loans for me in different states and done a lot of great stuff for me. And I want to welcome everybody to the Shore AHA Club. Again, the purpose of the club, guys, is for us to collaborate. So welcome to the club. You're now a member. I want you to come back every month. We want to essentially meet in person. The idea is to have timely topics, information that's important to us, so that when we're done collaborating, we then have something to go back to our clients, to a reason to make phone calls, a reason to call our sphere of influence. We now have something to talk about, something intelligent to say, something to put on social media other than it just sold or it just listed, and be coming from a point of education and a point of experience. I'm always one to take that kind of weird or deeper dive into things. It's just the way that my crazy mind works. And as TJ knows, I know a lot about lending, and I don't want to be a lender. But these are things that we have to know, right, to do our business and do it well and serve our community. So I thank all of you for coming. Once we get started, I have Kevin, who is my operations manager, here on the call. Kevin's going to be sharing with us a PDF as Ro Havens, who is our engineer special from the Highland Design Group, will be doing some speaking for us. So as you guys have questions, please raise your hands. If you have a question for TJ, please raise your hand. We'll open up your mic. We want this to be dialogue. I don't want this to be that traditional Zoom where you sit for an hour and just sip your coffee and take notes. I want this to be engaging. If you have questions, I want you to be able to, again, this is engaging. I want us to meet. That's why I really want us to meet in person, obviously, is to collaborate and feel each other's energy. We can't do that so much in this environment. So please welcome TJ Hildebrand. TJ is now with Ocean First Bank. I can tell you, TJ has moved his business several times. And when he first started to move his business, I thought to myself, I don't understand this person. This doesn't make any sense. Clearly he's not reliable. Every 2 years, what the hell? And then when I first met TJ, I met TJ at the bars and thought, this guy's crazy. I don't understand. Every time I see him, he's at happy hour. And then I realized, wow, he actually knows what he's talking about. And he goes to happy hour and he's networking. And I was like, I didn't realize that was like, I didn't do that. I went to happy hour and I drank and listened to this guy talk to me about loans. And then I realized he actually knows what he's talking about. And as time went on and recognizing he has moved his business and pivoted his business primarily to serve us. He recognizes what our community needs. He loves our community and recognizes he's got to be with a lender who's going to be able to serve us and serve our clients the best. Would you not agree with that?
100%. And I appreciate the invite, Helen. And a funny story about that is I'm 53 and I moved down to Shore at 33. And I didn't have a break into the market. And then I realized realtors like to go out to happy hours. So I drove around at different real estate offices, found out what cars they drove. Then I drove the bars to find out where they were at.
And I felt like every time I went to a bar, like this guy was there, and I was like, "What the heck, man?" He was young.
Be careful, because it was at the bar where
I met my. Me up, like, what's this guy's vibe? I don't quite get it. Like, you know what I mean? And then he's hanging out with my husband. I'm like, is he trying to pick him up? I don't understand what's going on here. And here we are, 20 some years later, married, kids, mortgages, dogs.
3 kids, 3 dogs. Right? Yeah. The bar actually is the reason why I'm married now and I have kids, and that's where I met my wife. So now I don't get to go out as much, and I'm not.
And now you're a bar owner versus a bar patron. So
yeah, that's true. But like triple play, I'm like, I really don't have the time to go down. I'd love to, but it's a lot of work. But anyway,
that's called diversifying your investment.
Yeah. So back to the part where I was changing companies. What it really comes down to is I try to work for lenders that do not have condo project approval departments, which is basically people that want to review everything. And they look for every piece. There's a lot of gray areas in condo project approval. I'm not that smart. I'm really experienced. It's been my line for years. I've probably done over 2,000 condos. And the reality is a lot of big lenders are afraid of buybacks from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So they might enlist Condo Tech, who's out of Philadelphia. And then you got a buyer that's got to pay a $320 condo questionnaire fee. They collect all the documentation. They ask for everything. The reality is when you're looking to do condo project approval and you're working with outside lenders, for the most part, any experience an outside lender in Philadelphia, say, or Bucks County has with condos are condos that are run by management companies. And when they're run by management companies, they're more in line with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac guidelines. And a lot of the times that loan officer is not interacting with the condo department. So when they say they do, I always say to a client, just ask the loan officer what they know about condo project approval and what they're going to ask for. And if they say we do condos all the time, that's avoiding the answer. Give me specifics on what you need down the shore. For example, a 6-unit condo association. Right away, my concern is if it's a full condo review, let's get the budget right away, see what's going on there. They got a new president in town. Let's get the insurances to make sure someone tried not to lower the insurance. But there's so many different caveats and variables to condo project approval. And I'm just going to give you my cell phone number. If you guys want to write it down, I'll give it to you in a minute to get a paper and pen. Just text me your email address. I've always had an open door, whether you refer business to me or not. If you have an issue with a condo, give me a call. I'd be happy to call the loan officer and review it with them. For example, Wildwood Square was denied because they called it a primarily transient condo, and they Googled the condo association and they found out that someone rented on the weekend. So I called the Annie Mac loan officer to say that's not the case. We're in a seasonal market. They're applying the standards they would to a Florida market. So being primarily transient in nature doesn't really affect that in a seasonal market. And he said, I'm done, take it over. And I did, and I closed it in 2 weeks. That's how I'm set up. But there's a lot of little caveats to it. 80% co-insurance seems to be an issue. Insurance companies sending over full policies as opposed to just the evidence of insurance. Condo questionnaires being filled out wrong. There's a lot to it. But if you I'm going to give you my phone number, and then what I'll do is I'll shoot me your email address, and I'll shoot you an email. Keep that for any questions you have that come up.
And then also, TJ, if you want to, you can put your phone number in the chat box.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And then that way they can just grab it, because we'll also be, and I think when it comes to the condo scene, when you're going to take a listing, guys, and again, this is to collaborate. So think of this for a second. When you, and I do this a lot. I call TJ a lot before I take a listing. I am often sending him a budget, and I'm asking for copies of the insurance declaration pages, particularly if it's an association that hasn't had a sale in many years. They are often underinsured and they don't even know it. And you, as the listing agent, because your client's not going to call the association and say, hey, we're underinsured, we have to raise the insurance for me to sell my place. You're usually the one, or I'm usually the one that makes that phone call. Before you take that listing, I think it's a great idea to make sure that what you've got is an actual sellable product, right? That our budget's in order. And that's kind of why we're really on this topic today of the structural integrity inspections and the capital reserve study. Because as we are now taking listings, do I have a sellable product? And something that I want to talk to you, TJ, a little bit about with regard to these new condominium laws in New Jersey. Do we know how this is going to affect funding, or is it just too early in that process that we don't even know if it's going to affect funding?
It hasn't even come up yet.
Okay.
It hasn't even come up yet.
Okay.
So eventually when it comes down, I mean, when you guys were changing your commission schedules, there was 5 different variations of how that was going to play out. Correct. So I'm interested to hear what they have to say in relation to that. I think it's going to have an impact, because some of the smaller associations where I've had, I don't want to call them arguments, so I call them discussions over the years, where, you know, an association will say, hey, we run a shoestring budget here. I'm like, I get that, but it's going to happen where something big's going to happen, then you're going to affect the ability to resell your property going forward. So that's an impact. But the other deep dive, just on the condo stuff, and I'll make it quick, and I just told you about this. I had a client, I was doing financing on it, was contingent upon the sale of his condo. And instead of just taking the application and putting it in and saying, hey, he's getting, you know, 100 grand off the sale of his condo, I looked at his condo and I said, I know your condo. It's a condotel. Who's buying your condo? Send me the pre-qual. They sent me the pre-qual. It was 10% down. I called the loan officer within 24 hours. I don't want to say I blew up the deal, because I didn't. I just found out something was going to happen within 24 hours that was going to take 2 to 3 weeks. And then he got it under contract with someone he knew a week later. But there's just so many caveats to it. And that's why if you text me anything that you realize a concern on a condo, or you think that you feel like you got a good explanation from a loan officer, still give me a call, because they're just tap dancing. And sometimes you need to get a clear indication on what's going on. Yeah,
it's very true. And there's been times when I've had come to TJ with a product, and he says, hey, I'm not your guy, and this is who you need to call for this. Or he might say, hey, this is how you could do it, but this is how it has to go down. So I think it's just, he's a strategist more than your traditional loan officer. And I think that's really important, that you're strategizing with your clients or for your clients in advance to make sure that you're pointing them in the right direction and really making the right recommendation. Right. So thank you so much for that. I do appreciate you, and I hope that you continue to do this for another 20 years.
Thank you, Melania. The young kids, I probably will be.
Yes, because you've got really little ones. You started a lot later than me, my friend. Does anybody have any questions for TJ that they want to ask him about right now with regards to a building or something or a situation? Because I really, you know, while you have him, please feel free that if you want to use him, you know, he's here. Again, he's currently with Ocean First Bank. Ocean's First, what's I think interesting about them is they are a portfolio lender, which means they will hold their money in-house. So if you have something funky that a big lender that you know is going to resell that mortgage product, they're not going to want to keep it. It's going to an Ocean First, a Sturdy, a Crest. Those folks sometimes are a little more fun to play with. And TJ will sometimes tell you, not me, them.
A real quick note on that. So in February 2022 is when Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac came out with the loan level pricing adjustments on second homes. And they're basically priced them like investment properties. So we're now connected with the Federal Home Loan Bank of New York, and we can do a lot of second homes with no loan level pricing adjustments. So, and I love Crest Savings Bank. I send them business. Right now, their rate on a 30-year fix is 7 1/8. I mean, I can literally do a 10% down second home, single family out in the villas, conforming loan amount at 7% with half the lender fees. You know, and that's if I didn't have Ocean First Bank right now, it would be very challenging. I'd be remaking my market. I can't work for Crest. I can't work for Sturdy. You know, you'd be working with the brokers or some of the retail lenders, And basically their gig is, hey, the rate's 7.5%, but you can refinance in a year. Like they don't even know, that there's outlets out there without the loan level pricing adjustments.
Right.
On the jumbo side, it's a bank business. I mean, if you're going to a broker or retail lender, they're just going to be brokering it out to a credit union, and the rate's going to, and by the way, it's not always rate. If a loan is between an eighth and a quarter, but they're experienced, I would say to the client, go that way. If it's a half or more, that could be a challenge. But I'm not, I don't want people just to be rate focused. I want them to be more local loan officer focused. There's a lot of great local loan officers. We all know each other, and we all call each other, and we refer each other business.
Exactly, and that's the beauty of it, is when one person can't. I find that your goal is to really help us put our clients in the best hands, and if it's not you, that's okay. You'll get the next one, put them where they belong, and keep things moving forward.
Yeah.
Which is great. So again, thank you so much, everyone. TJ Hildebrand from Ocean First Bank. I so appreciate you. He is a homeowner, a second homeowner here in the Wildwoods. Lived here for many, many years, and then once he had children, decided he actually needed to get off the rock and go to a real neighborhood. So I understand.
Thank you.
We miss you, and we hope to see you soon.
All right, thanks.
So
I'm
again,
staying for the lawyer stuff.
Yes, please stay for the legal side of things. Thank you so much. And anyone, if anybody has any questions for TJ, please feel free to raise your hands, or we can unmic you and have you, ask a question if you need to. Otherwise, we'll dive into what I'm really excited about is this new Structural Integrity Act and the Capital Reserve Study. Kevin, if you could please feature Anthony Havens, Roe Havens from the Highland Design Group, I would appreciate that on our screen. If you're able to do that for me, we can make TJ small, and there he is. Hello, this great guy. Yes, thank you so much, Roe Havens from the Highland Design Group. Thank you so much for taking my call. When I reached out to you a little over a month ago, you were actually, I believe, out in the field when I called the Highland Design Group, and you got back to me, which is great, because being out in the field means you were probably doing what you need to do, which is look at buildings.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about what you do, please.
So my name is Roe Havens. I'm going to present to you guys on behalf of the Highland Group. We're headquartered, I'll say, out of Claremont, New Jersey, which is on Route 9, right between the Sea Isle and Avalon exits. If you've seen the RV sales place in Chocolate Face, we're right across the street. So we're definitely local to Cape May County. We also have offices in Ocean City and Media, Pennsylvania. Our office has all under one roof: engineers, architects, land surveyors, and environmental consultants. So if you need any of those things, give us a shout. I myself am part of the structural engineering staff, and I'm going to present to you guys today on what's being called the New Jersey Structural Integrity Law. And there's two halves to this new law that's been passed about this time last year. The first half I'll go over is the structural assessments portion, and it's the more straightforward half, I think. And then after that, I'm going to go over the reserve fund portion, which I think affects more people. And I'll take any questions you guys might have for each component. So yeah, let's dive into it. Kevin, are you able to share the PDF that I shared with you?
Yeah, totally. I'm gonna share right now.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
So I think this was distributed to you guys electronically, and if not, it can be.
Yeah, we'll certainly make sure that everyone has copies 100%.
I tried to orient this as a bullet point list for what are the triggers for having to satisfy the structural assessment component of this law, because I figured that's probably where you guys would find yourself more often. Not exactly what has to be performed, but who needs it. And then after that's established, you can dive into the details of what's being performed at a given assessment. But to start off, we'll go over what exactly this law considers a covered building under this legislation. And right from the definition they have in the law is this is a residential building that is categorized as use group R1 or R2, having load-bearing concrete, masonry, steel, or hybrid structure, including podium decks. So what does that mean? First of all, use groups R1 and R2 can be primarily transient, like a hotel or motel, or more often, as it relates to this law, is primarily permanent, being more than 2 units, which is condominiums. If it's a single family house or a 2-family house, it is not group R2. But if it's more than that, then it is.
Can I stop you right there? So if we have your traditional side-by-side townhome,
Hmm.
You do technically have a condominium master deed and bylaws, and you have shared insurance.
Hmm.
A side-by-side townhome would not need to have a structural assessment done. Is that correct?
If it's only 2 units, then
Only
it's
two
not
units.
part of use group R2 and it doesn't fall under this law.
Excellent. My next question is in Ocean City, we have top and bottoms, again, 2 units. Would they are, again, just R2, regardless of how they're constructed, they would not be under that uh, guidance, correct?
Correct.
All right, awesome. Okay, thank you.
So once you have the use group identified, whether your building is or isn't part of that group, the next checkbox you have to go over is, does it have load-bearing concrete, masonry, steel, or a combination of those things? So especially in Wildwood, this is common. I'd say that's probably the most common of the shore towns. You often see, it used to be a motel. It's all precast concrete and cinder block walls. It's a big masonry monster. That definitely falls under this, consideration of having load-bearing concrete and masonry. We don't often see load-bearing steel in our area, so I think I'll skip over that one. But again, load-bearing concrete, masonry, those are the big ones. If you have a wood constructed building, it is exempted from this component of the law. So once you determine, do you have to have one performed, the next question is when. And it's broken out by time. So if the building is more recent, it was constructed after January 8th, 2009, and that time is 15 years before the day that this law was passed, then you have to conduct the structural assessment 1 year after the time that that building turns 15, if that makes sense. And then if it's older than that, you have to have it done by January 8th, 2026. They gave you 2 years from the time that this law was passed. So now we're down to, 1 year, just because everybody's finding out about it now. There wasn't like a mass email that went out to everyone alerting you, hey, you have to have this done. And then once you have your first structural assessment performed, you have to have it performed in 5-year intervals. So you can't go more than 5 years without having one done if you're in that group, or if you see something come up that warrants an investigation. So say it's only been 2 years, but somebody notices this big new crack, then call an engineer, that kind of deal. So just some examples I put at the bottom. The first one is Gardens Plaza in Ocean City. There's nothing special about this building, but I figured it's one that everybody's seen right on the boardwalk. It's all made out of concrete, masonry, big, concrete floors that cantilever off towards the ocean. That definitely needs to have a structural assessment. That construction style of being concrete and masonry satisfies the trigger for needing to do this. Another picture below it is just a regular wood framed house. Wood construction is not part of this legislation, so does not need the structural assessment. More commonly, what we see, and I call this just the most common shore construction. This is all over North Wildwood, Sea Isle, any of the beach towns. You have a masonry garage at the ground level, and then you have, however many units above that, they're all wood framed. So you have a wood frame building, those components are exempt. And then at the bottom, you do have load bearing masonry. And unfortunately, the law is, I think, unclear in whether or not this building needs to be structurally assessed. Some engineer could look at this and say, technically, you have load bearing masonry. That's part of the law. You need to have this done. Our
I was getting hung up myself.
Our office's opinion is that this construction configuration is no different than any wood framed house that has continuous masonry foundation walls. And I don't think it's the intent of the state to have every building between the city of New York and the city of Cape May that has, masonry foundation assessed. That would be, every building that doesn't just sit on piling, really. That would be the only thing that doesn't fall into that category. So if it's all wood framing, wood floor joists, wood roof rafters, wood wall studs, and you have a masonry garage that's continuous foundation walls, they just happen to be a story above the ground. Our opinion is that the structural assessment is not warranted.
And I think to go one step further, it's because, as you just said, it's the continuous masonry construction versus a pillar or a podium holding that building up sporadically in this open garage space. You truly have framed, you've got cinder block walls in between all of these. So it's really a much, it's more of a foundation.
Exactly. You know, sometimes there was one instance, I think it was in Ocean City, where we saw isolated concrete columns, and their first floor was a concrete deck, and then above that it was all wood framing. Well, because you have that concrete floor system, then you still are part of the structural assessment. That doesn't, the wood walls above that doesn't exempt you from everything else. So it's kind of like a case by case basis. But if with those items in mind, if anybody's unsure about it, you can always give us a shout and ask us. You know, we'll be happy to try to field that question as best as we can. Actually, and I saw in the chat, somebody said that my audio wasn't as loud as Helen Ann's. Is this better? I tried to move my mic a little bit.
And that could just be because I'm naturally loud. If anybody has a question, please raise your hand. If there's a building that you're thinking about or that you're just not clear on something before we move on, let me know, because I want to make sure that you're clear on this before you go on, so that you can, you know, that before we move on to the money side of things, that you really have a good understanding of where we are with this. You know, every 15 years this has to be done. New construction is exempt. Primarily, we've got masonry style at our base is what we're concerned about. And if I'm correct about this, the concern with the masonry style or the podium style is that we have potentially cracks in the foundation, water penetration comes in, the water then could potentially rot the rebar that's supposed to be supporting the concrete. So you're rotting from the inside out, you don't even know it's happening. And then the next thing you know, the support for your weight bearing supports are no longer able to bear weight. Is that kind of where we're headed there?
I think so. I think with a wood framed building, there's a lot of repetition. So if there's something wrong with a stud or there's something wrong with a floor joist, it's not going to be like a catastrophic collapse of your home.
Mm-hmm.
When you have these isolated, you know, concrete columns, or you have a very thin, you know, patio slab that cantilevers out of a building, you know, a crack's a lot more significant in those scenarios. So I think the state's trying to get on that, and I know this law was passed after that condominium collapse in Florida, and I think they're just trying to make sure that everybody's aware of the health of their building. They don't want something to go ignored because they just never got it assessed.
I was actually in Florida at the time that the Champlain Towers South building collapsed. I was there with my kids who were visiting their grandparents, and I found out later, I don't know, weeks later, there was teenage kids from North Jersey who had flown down by themselves and were visiting their grandparents, and they were in that building when the building collapsed. I was looking more at the legal side of it originally, because as it turned out with that particular association, there was a long legal battle with the board, a couple of different boards, and the association as to how they were going to address it. They had actually voted to make some repairs. The board actually, in their master deed and bylaws, they have the ability to override the vote of the association. They overrode, and there was a big legal battle happening. And while this whole legal battle was happening, nothing was really being done to protect the people, and it became a very massive expense that to the point where no one could fix, and then the building collapsed. It really tugged at my heart, because I thought to myself, my kids could very easily be in Florida visiting their grandparents, and something like this could happen. And I was really more looking at the legal side of it, trying to understand how could this have happened, and then thinking we have all of these associations, not necessarily buildings like this per se, but we have associations where these are, for the most part, these are volunteers. I mean, we lived in an association. We were volunteers, and we don't know what we're doing. We're flying by the seat of our pants, and now we have this fiduciary responsibility to protect our neighbors. Like, what the hell? That's very scary. You know, it's very scary. Now here we are as real estate agents saying, well, what's going on with this? We need to educate ourselves so that we can, you know, be the proponents of information and be able to, you know, portray it. But it was shocking to me, the legal side of it. And then quite honestly, about a year or so later, I had seen a real estate agent. His name is Paul, who might be on this call. Paul's a great agent. We've done a lot of work together. And Paul had put a post in one of his listings like 2 years ago, some blurb about the structural blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh my God, like, what is this guy talking about? Like, one more thing we have to keep our minds on, like, what the hell? And then I saw this law, and then all these things started happening. I thought, oh, wait a minute, we're not really educated on this, and we need to be, because as you know, and like you said, the Wildwoods, these are a lot of buildings that we sell, guys, and we need to know what's happening. And I'm coming to find, and Anthony, maybe you could help talk about this a little bit, or anybody else that's coming to find. It seemed like to me, when I was reaching out to different associations, those that had professional property management had a better handle on this, or were a little bit more in the know and were a few steps ahead, versus those that were individually managed, or maybe your 4-unit association. They were like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? What are you talking about?
Yep.
And I thought, oh boy, this is scary. And then I had a buyer over the summer who said, oh, well, I'm going to wait and see. I'm not going to make an offer until I get a copy of their structural integrity report. And I was like, well, that's not going to be like for a long, long time. Like we're putting our lives on hold now. And I thought, oh my God, I sell real estate. We sell real estate. If the transactions, like if we don't have real estate to sell, we can't call Euro and say, hey, you guys got to go out and do a site visit. We need a survey. Like it's all this wheel that has to keep rolling, right? And I thought, wait a second, what is this legislation? Where's it coming from? And sometimes we have legislation and we don't know how it's actually going to affect us. And as I started calling all these people, nobody knew, and nobody kind of still does. But here we are, we have the laws now that are in place, and we've got to figure out how can we educate, because again, the idea behind it is to keep people safe. They want to come down, they want to use their condo, particularly we sell second homes versus these primary residents. In Champlain Towers, a lot of these people lived in that building. It was not second homes. They were year-round residents in these properties. But for us, we cater to a lot of second home owners. How can we help educate them because they're not here? And kind of be that proponent, if you will, for them.
Yeah, exactly. And I will say, I know that the law, the basis for it was in, this big, it was devastating, a structural collapse. But most people that I've interacted with, if they see a crack, they call an engineer. Most people are pretty good about getting things investigated like that. And what I'm finding on a lot of these site visits is that people are having to have an assessment done on a building where otherwise they don't have reason to call an engineer. So I can walk through and I don't see any cracks in the walls, or I don't see any, evidence of movement in the foundation or things like that. Because if it was there, they would have called us already. And it's, as an office of engineers, very often I do go out. Somebody sees a crack in their foundation, even if it's just a single family home. They call us up and I go look at it and try to identify, what the cause of that is. And it's very easy to say, you had a problem and I looked at it and here's a solution. And with the visits that are precipitated by this legislation, they're calling me up and I'm walking through a building that doesn't have any problems with it, which is encouraging.
Yes.
I hope that's the case for everyone. I don't want to find problems. But just that's kind of what happens in these assessments. Like if I was going to conduct one today, I'd walk out and I'd, walk the perimeter of the building and I'd go through each unit and look at the, the structural components that are concrete and masonry to the extent that they're visible. A lot of times there's, drywall covering the load-bearing walls, or there's carpeting over the floors. And I'm not going to make you tear all that up. I'm not going to get invasive unless there's a crack in the wall that suggests, something more needs to happen here. And if that needs to take place, then it will. But if I walk through and everything looks fine, you don't have any history of cracks, you haven't, repainted in 10 years and everything looks fine. It's not like you're trying to cover something up on me. Then that's a healthy building, and that's good.
All right, let me just hop in the chat real quick. There was Peg had a quick question. She just wanted to recap, and here's interesting. Let's be clear on this. Peg just wanted to confirm if it's a 10-unit townhome, cinder block construction, would it require or would it not require?
That would require a structural study.
Okay.
It's more than 2 units, so it's use group R2,
Okay.
and it's cinder block construction. So that's that masonry bullet point.
Yeah. Okay. So guys, again, if it's a side-by-side townhome, just 2 units standing alone side-by-side, would not have to go through the structural study. And also, if you were a top and down, like we see a lot of times in Ocean City, would not qualify. It's when we have more than 2 is when we have that situation. Okay. Yep. Let me see if they have any other questions. Let's see here. how will we know as agents whether a complex must have? Plus, associations won't necessarily take a realtor's inquiry on this as something that must be done. Yeah, it's very true. I mean, a lot of what I was really just finding, Donna, is a lot of associations are now starting to have their meetings, and now they're starting to get a little bit more informed. There's also a group that I was not at all familiar with, and it's called the Community Institute of America, CIA, and they really focus on community association, condominium association, homeowner association issues. But Donna, I'm not sure if I know what your question is. So if you want to unmute yourself to ask so that we can make sure that whatever questions you have we are really being clear on, please. Yeah, feel free to unmute yourself before we move on to the money side of things, because I want to make sure that everybody's clear.
How's this going to work with condominium complexes? Are we going to have ask them, the association, if they have the structural integrity report showing that they don't have any issues? And if they don't, and they don't know what I'm talking about, then what do I do?
Yeah, exactly right. And we've actually run into a little bit of this. And that's really why we're here today, so that we as agents can get a handle on who this is supposed to fall under this umbrella and who doesn't fall under this umbrella, so that we can kind of be a source of information for those people. Again, I'm finding those that have professional property management, they're in the know. It's the ones that are not being professionally managed that really have no idea. What we're going to do today is we have the PDF that we have from Anthony. We can perhaps also even provide a link to the law, because as I started talking to a condominium, I took a listing in the summer just because I was listening to this. I was like, hey, do you have this? And the guy was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I said, do you have a budget? And he's like, well, not really. If we have to fix something, we just call each other. I'm like, oh boy, okay. Just breathe. Let's figure this out. I'm like, you guys have insurance? Like, let's look at it all and let's figure this out, because we need to have a sellable product here. How are we going to move forward? And as it turned out, because of the nature of their building, they did not have to have the structural side of it. But as we're all about to learn in a minute, everybody has to do the capital reserve study. And that's where it's going to get fishy, or it's going to get a little bit squirrely, because yeah, Donna, we're going to have to be the bearers of bad news for people who don't know. But I think at the end of this, if we all want to get together and brainstorm as to what talking points that we can have to reach out to our sphere of influence, past clients, to really be a source of education. Now, my whole goal would be that now that we've got some information, let's find a great way that we can disseminate to our clients, to the public, to our communities, and then have them lean on us to help them moving forward. Yeah, but you're right. How are they going to, now they have to believe us. You know, here we come. Here comes the great real estate agent, the bearer of bad news.
So now up front, instead of asking for master deed bylaws, rules and regs, master insurances, we're also going to ask them for their certification on structural integrity.
Yeah. Do we have a copy of your structural reserve study? Where are you on that? Or do you have have you done your reserve budget? Like, where are you? Yeah, these are going to be questions that we're going to now have to be asking. And I think once we are done with our call, we then may even know like the verbiage of getting the marbles out of my mouth as to what am I actually asking for? What am I supposed to be saying? And then helping these people, if they don't have what they need, helping point them in the right direction. You know, and speaking with it. That's the good part of having Anthony here today, is that maybe he can help us try to figure all this out, and again have us have some good talking points to help move on. The good news, as Anthony is seeing, is that for the most part, a lot of the buildings that he's going to, they're not seeing anything wrong. So by the grace of God, like, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. But, you know, Anthony, when you're seeing, what kind of money, can you give us a feel for what kind of money are associations looking at if they have to call you out to come out and do some kind of a visit or some kind of an inspection? What is this going to cost these folks?
This is something that varies on a case-by-case basis for us. Instead of having a flat rate, you know, you have so many units, it's this number, you have so many units, it's that number. I try to research your property as much as I'm able to through just Google Maps and Google Earth prior to giving you a price. So if it's, I'll say like 6 units, if it's that small and there's a lot less units to walk through, and walking the perimeter is going to take a hot minute, then there's a lot less work to do there than, you know, a 60 unit, you know, hotel conversion or something like that. On the, I'll say more typically, 10 units and under is what we've been seeing most commonly. It's about $5,000, $6,000 in that neighborhood. And that's for us to walk through each unit, looking at the load-bearing components, looking at the load-bearing walls and the precast concrete floors if they're there, doing the perimeter, and then a report outlining, you know, what problems do you have if there are any, you know, what should you do about them, or, you know, your building's in good health, do this again in 5 years.
That's awesome. Now, let me ask you a question. Just if you were to see, you know, as you're walking through or walking the perimeter, you see an area where you've got, you know, some cracks or something structural that you're not really feeling warm and fuzzy about. From a testing perspective, what invasive or what do we do? What can we do next to what's the next deeper dive, if you will?
I think if you have a masonry wall, say it's at the foundation level, and you can clearly see the masonry and there's a crack in it, just looking at a crack, I don't know what caused that. There are certain items that come to the front of my mind, but usually our first recommendation is to monitor it. You know, is the crack getting bigger? And if so, then there's active movement that, you know, you need to do something to stop that. And if you monitor it for a year and it doesn't get any bigger, or, you know, there's no additional movement that takes place, um, then there's not an active ongoing problem. In that case, usually you can patch it up and it's not going to move again. If I was to go through someone's unit and I saw cracking in a wall that was covered in drywall, but it was known to be, you know, a load-bearing masonry component, then in that case, we might recommend that, you know, you retain a contractor to open things up a little bit more so we can look at the structure behind that and what condition is that in.
Gotcha. Okay, good to know. Okay, just from a curiosity perspective, because I think, you know, you can't always just walk around and look at something. If you see something, then you say, okay, we see something. Let's monitor. If the association doesn't have answers as to what's going on or have a better feel for what's happening, monitor and then take a deeper dive if you need to.
Right. Yep.
All right, good to know. Guys, does anybody have any other questions on the structural side of this? Because we're going to move to the capital reserve study, which seems to be a big pain point right now for a lot of our associations. But I just want to make sure that everybody's clear on the structural, you know, on the structural integrity side of this, that you understand what buildings are affected, which ones are not. Again, the goal of this is that when we walk away, we have a better understanding so that we can kind of reach out to some clients, have some talking points, say, hey, Happy New Year, and what kind of shapes your association in, you know, but I just want to make sure that everybody is getting their questions answered. Okay, someone had asked who should be initiating the study. The studies are supposed to be initiated, and Anthony, correct me if I'm wrong, the studies are to be initiated by the boards of these condominium associations.
That is correct. Yeah, the state is saying you have to have this done. You know, if you're a condominium in this group and you fall into this category, then you need to have this completed. But it's up to the boards to actually take that action and reach out to someone and have the work done. As an engineering company, we'll do the work, but we're not reaching out to boards and saying, you know, you need to retain us for, you know, this amount of work or anything like that. We'll perform it for you and be of service, but we're not initiating that conversation, if that makes sense.
I've seen, again, Sue had asked, Sue Heenan from Avalon had asked about who initiates the study of the HOA, and are the engineers contacting the local building associations. I would say if you were an engineering firm that was looking for business, I would certainly be reaching out to local associations, because from a marketing perspective, why not? But Sue, I have found that the ones that had the professional property management seem to be more in the know and have already initiated this process. Some of them have already gotten estimates to understand what the costs are, and now they've kind of put it back onto the board of the association's hand to say, okay, guys, how do you now want to proceed? A lot of these folks on the structural side of things, if I'm correct in my timing, aren't jumping through those hoops just yet because that law isn't going to be enforced until 2026.
That's correct.
Whereas the money, the reserve funding law is in effect now.
Yep.
When it comes to the insurance companies, and this is a great question, Sue, and this is still an unknown, as TJ just indicated on the lending side of things. I've spoken with a handful of insurance providers because I first thought, hey, your insurance providers, when it comes time for your renewal, all your insurance provider is going to do is say, give me a copy of a reserve study. Oh, you don't have it? This is a wonderful opportunity to not renew your coverage, right? But my concern was, what if they don't have it? And I reached out to a handful of insurance people, local, state level, they don't really know. And that's kind of the weird part about this, is that we have legislation that's now in place, but we're not really sure who's going to actually enforce the legislation. I've spoken with some local municipalities and said to them, what's your plan? And they said, we don't really have a plan. The board is supposed to be initiating these studies. The board is then supposed to retain a copy, and they are also supposed to be distributing a copy to all of their members. That's part of their fiduciary responsibility and a part of the law. So again, on the insurance side of things, we don't know how it's going to shake down. On the lending side of things, we don't know how it's going to shake down, but it is supposed to be the association's responsibility to be reaching out and making sure that they're compliant. And that's really where we come into play, guys. And to Donna's point, ignorance is not an excuse of the law. Because the consumer doesn't know doesn't mean that they don't have to have it. So now it's our job to say, hey, great, I was on this call, and Happy New Year. I got something I need to share with you guys. Where are you on this? And as Chip had mentioned, we want to kind of come from a point of education, not doom and gloom, but this is positive. We want to make sure that you guys are safe going into the summer. We want you to be able to enjoy your decks, enjoy your space, and be able to be outside. So I think that's a big part of it. We don't know. Like Jason said, it's all about like the buyer's agreement. It's all about how we are going to how you're going to present it. And we have to be coming from a source of, I'd rather have you guys be ahead of this than be behind this and find out that you're not going to be able to have an insurance renewal, or find out that you're not going to be able to sell your condominium if you want to, or find out that you have a problem and someone's going to get hurt. That's the biggest thing we don't want to have happen.
Yep. Totally agree.
Yeah. And Donna, with regard to new construction, this is not going to apply. This will only be for buildings that are 15 years or older. So again, at some point down the road, they're going to have to be, and that's also something I talked to the building inspectors about. I said, hey, you guys, when you go into these buildings annually for your fire inspections, will this then not be your opportunity to say to that board, hey, we want to have a copy of this in our file for your association? Some of the couple towns I talked to were like, we're not really sure. We're still figuring it out. So a lot of it seems like it remains to be seen.
Yep, for those newer buildings, just because you mentioned it, I'll just reiterate to everybody that they give the association until 1 year after the time at which the building turns 15 from when its initial CO was released. So they still have to do it. It's just pushed down the road a little bit at a later time.
Right. And someone asked, what if they don't comply? Like, what if they just say, well, we're not doing this? I don't know what's going to happen, because as of right now, there really is no enforcement. There's no penal, there's no penalty for not, as of right now, from a lending insurance perspective or from a building. I'm thinking at some point someone's going to care. What's the point of having legislation if no one's actually paying attention to it?
Right.
We just don't know how this is going to go down.
Yeah,
so now let's dive into, if everybody's clear on the structural side of things, which again is not going to go into effect or be enforced until January of next year, 2026. But now we can talk about the capital reserve, or the reserve funding side of things. And that law is now being enforced now, or tomorrow, I believe, is the actual day, or today, or yesterday. So why don't we dive into that, Anthony, and talk a little about the money side of things, because I believe that's going to affect everyone.
Yes. Yeah. So the first kind of category I have up here is who needs a reserve fund study. And the answer is associations managing more than $25,000 worth of common interests. And I've had the question asked, well, who is an association? If you have a body that manages common elements and facilities for a group of individual parties, that's an association. So in the case of most people here, that's going to be a condominium association. There's another bullet point I highlighted. This even includes, a duplex. If you have an association that owns the roof and the foundation and these common things between the top and bottom units, it's that association, even if it's just two people, is responsible for those items, then you're in this group. And you'll see the threshold there is more than $25,000 worth of common interests. And I usually say, if the roof is a common interest, if you figure for the cost of replacing the roof at some point, that's going to be more than $25,000. That puts just about everybody in this category. And actually put that part in bold. If you have a condominium association, there's a 99.9% chance you need the reserve fund study performed. And then again, if you are in that group, when does it need to be conducted? The original legislation says tomorrow. That's not going to happen anymore. So the best you can do is just as soon as possible. And then once the initial reserve fund study is established, just like the structural investigation, this is to be revisited and updated as needed in 5-year intervals. I also thought it was worth throwing in who can conduct a reserve fund study. Engineers, which is our office, architects, which is also our office, or what the state calls reserve specialists credentialed through the Association of Professional Reserve Analysts. I don't know anything about the Association of Professional Reserve Analysts. I don't know of any in our area, but if you need an engineer or an architect, you got my contact info. And then I figured I'd just throw it in here kind of to talk about what happens during a reserve fund study analysis. And I inserted just a sample, like a snippet of what our ultimate deliverable might be. So what we're looking to do eventually is ensure that there's funding established for the eventual replacement of every common element. And usually the list is a lot longer than this. It ends up being like 2 or 3 pages, but here's just for, example's sake. Roofing is on there. We figure out how many square feet there is of roof, assign it a dollar value per square foot, and that gives us the total value. And we'll have a typical useful life. So an asphalt shingle roof might last 25 years, or an asphalt parking lot might last 25 years. And then depending on its current age, we'll subtract that and figure out how much useful life it has left in it. In some cases, we can override that. Like you'll see this is actually from a condominium that we went to. Their parking lot was pretty old. It was almost 50 years old, but we assessed it, and by visual inspection, there's not potholes all over the place. It's not falling into a million pieces. So you're not forced to replace it just because it's old. It can remain in place for another 10 years or so, and then you'll have the money to do that replacement. And when that time comes, then you do so. Our table also accounts for inflation and interest rates. So the current cost of doing an asphalt parking lot or doing vinyl siding might be a certain dollar amount, but 20 years from now, it's going to be more than that. So we can account for that. And then we break that down, that future value, by the annual deposit required to get there. So you'll see if the future replacement of something is $80,000 and you have 10 years to get there, and you account for a little bit of interest on your savings account, then you need about $7,900 per year just to save up for the parking lot replacement. And that process gets repeated for every single item. So it's parking, it's railings, it's balcony surface coatings, it's the siding. Some cases it's the windows and doors, some cases not.
Right.
Things like that.
So really, whatever the common area elements are, according to your master deed and bylaws, is then what has to pretty much go under this reserve. And correct me if I'm wrong, but when we have new construction, and we have our developer is now creating his new master deed, his new bylaws, do we not have part of this, a schedule of what ideally you're going to look like going forward, so that you as a group know what you should be funding for? Am I correct in making that statement? So as associations, we should know what we need. I think what I'm trying to say is, I think associations over the years, in trying to run a tight ship and not be expensive, if you will, to each other, to the fellow homeowners and members, is that we weren't properly funding ourselves all along the way. And from a lending perspective, as you guys know, when we're going to be having a buyer buy a condominium, lender typically says, hey, I need to see the budget. Budget has to have at least 10% of their operating budget has to be in a capital reserve fund. So you say the association has, $32,000 in operating expenses every year. As long as they've got $3,200 in what's called a capital reserve fund, we're good to go. Lender's going to be happy. But when you think about that, you say to yourselves, well, $3,200 in a capital reserve fund, what's it actually going to fix? What's that really going to pay for? That always kind of bothered me from a practical perspective to begin with, because I thought, well, great, I sold a condominium in this building 5 years ago and they had $3,200. Now it's 10 years later and they still have $3,200. And then now they need a new roof. That's going to cost $32,000. Where do we go from here? I think buildings haven't been funding themselves properly along the way. And now here they are kind of caught with their pants down a little bit I feel like maybe they don't, they're just not prepared because they weren't funding themselves correctly all along. And then you have new people that buy in and just have no idea. And now here they are, and they're stuck in this situation. But in theory,
Yes.
if the association, when it was set up, had they been funding themselves really according to a schedule like this from the beginning, we wouldn't all be in this situation now. Is that a valid point?
Yes, I think absolutely.
Okay.
I usually tell folks, when they see the total annual contribution that our reserve fund study might recommend at the bottom of it, it's usually more than people are collecting already.
Yeah.
And people's dues are going to go up to pay for that. But on the flip side, say, I'll keep using the roof as an example just because every building has one. The next time the roof has to be redone, you don't have to take out a loan for it, or you don't have to have a special assessment or put it to vote. The savings are already there. The money is already established. You take that money you already have in your account and you pay for things that need to be done as the time comes up. So just as I think Chip mentioned earlier, ultimately, I think is going to be a good thing for people once these reserve funds are figured out and enacted. My goal isn't to make everybody pay more money per month for their condo, but to keep the maintenance of their building in a healthy place.
Yeah, from what I've seen right now, the past number of months, just in the diligence of a little bit of business that I've been doing with listings that I have and buyers that we have under contract, just about every condominium association is right now in the process of raising their condominium fees or putting in some kind of a small term special assessment to help them catch up with some sort of a plan in place. But I'm seeing for the most part, just about everybody's not properly funded.
Mhm.
And then that kind of, as us as agents, lends back to the affordability end of things, because right now, historically, our prices are high. Our interest rates are a little bit higher. So the affordability that people maybe were enjoying is now being taken away. And now we have to talk about, okay, other ancillary costs to second home ownership, property maintenance, property insurances, and now, of course, this condominium fee. And now that this fee has to go higher. There was a call that I was on and a bunch of attorneys, and one gentleman had said something to the tune of you can't outrace you can't outrun father time, and you can't do something like you can't outrun you can't outbeat mother nature. Like you can't get around mother nature and you can't outrun father time. Like, and you're always going to have nature and time that are going to be against you as an association. And we've got to be thinking, okay, if I'm going to own this thing for years, what am I going to do? I had a seller recently who said, well, we now have a special assessment. I'm not going to pay that. I thought, well, how long have you lived here? Because you've enjoyed the benefit of home ownership for the past 10 years. And I can appreciate that you don't want to pay that, but now you want to sell your place for top dollar and ask the new family to pay that? That don't make any sense to me. Like you did pay your fair share along the way. So these are conversations that we have to kind of figure out as agents as to how we're going to have. And quite frankly, when it comes to money and people having to put their hands in their pockets, it can become a little bit sticky. And we're going to have to
Yep.
figure that out. But guys, just so that we're clear, side-by-side townhomes do not have to have a structural integrity study, but side-by-side townhomes do have to have capital reserve study in place, and they have to make sure that they're properly funded for what may be going forward. And when we think about, what's covered, if you have an association with $25,000 or more of common area interest, which for the most part is really every association. If you've got a roof,
Mhm.
there's 25.
Right. And just so I'm making sure I'm not confusing anyone, there's nothing in the law that specifically mentions duplexes or 2-unit associations. That's kind of a reading between the lines inference that if you have a top and bottom duplex, the top owner doesn't own the roof. It's the roof for the whole building. Um, so it's still a common interest between two property owners who are on the same lot. So if you have an association and you have common interests, you need a reserve fund study if you have more than $25,000. If it's set up so that there's no association somehow and you just write each other checks, I'm not going to tell you have to set up an association, but there are probably common elements there that aren't being funded the way that the state is anticipating.
Correct. I had a situation, and typically, we find exterior items tend to be common area elements. And when we're dealing with a buyer and a seller in contract, we then sometimes have to go back to the association, say, hey, association, hi, here I am, trying to help these guys move on with their lives. and we have something that we need you to address because it's part of common area elements, not necessarily their problem, but now it's kind of all of our problem. You see a bit of that happening, and I find that these people are tend to be on the underfunded side of things. And it's not always necessarily a pleasant conversation to have, but as you're looking at this, we're seeing that people don't have the money that they need, particularly in those in these smaller associations.
Yep, for sure.
Does anybody have any questions about the money side of things? Because we really want to make sure that you guys are really clear on this. I just posted a quick question here. Let's see. And we did post the we're going to put the PDF in the chat, so please make sure that you guys have this. Yeah, duplex owners don't usually have a joint account because they just write up checks for insurances. I don't know if they would have to necessarily, Jerry, open up a separate account. I think as long as they're having just some kind of, as long as they're keeping their well, let me put it this way. I have seen budgets where they only have one account, but on their budget, they have a line item that says capital reserve and there's something for it. So yeah, maybe they may have to buy a CD or find some kind of a way to keep something allocated separately to sort of figure this out, because all associations are supposed to be having a capital reserve study. They're all supposed to be having a budget. We find in practice that they don't. I also find that, curiously, for those associations that are not professionally managed, and this was something I had spoken to one of my owners about recently. I said, you guys, you manage yourselves and you're doing a great job. I said, but you should really consider some sort of a portal or some sort of a place where you can house all of the information for your association so that your members have access to it. And then as your board retires and moves on, that the history of your association is there. There's so many times. I had people this summer that sold their condominium, and they and the other people who also sold their condominium went to the bank and closed the account. And we're like, oh, we closed the account. And I'm like, why would you? I'm like, you don't close the account. You need to pass it on to the other people that are still owners. And they were like, well, some of the things you hear, you're like, oh my God. And our job is to try to help these people, not, like you said, Anthony, create accounting nightmares for them, or create these big where they're writing these big fat checks, but try to help them kind of figure out moving forward what they should be doing, to kind of make this make sense for them, and help them in practice, because they don't know. They're only volunteers, and they might be looking at us to guide them because nobody else really is. I just want to hop in the chat just real quick and make sure that I'm not missing anybody.
I also see a question in there from Peg that says, is funding expected to be in a certain place for when the particular replacement is anticipated, or fully funded now? And there's different ways that you can kind of break out the annual contribution for a reserve fund study. The most common, and the way that we've typically done our reserve funds, is if you have a component that needs to be replaced in 10 years is the estimate, then we'll break it out so you have even contributions for those 10 years, so that when the replacement finally arrives, the funding is available.
Yeah, and Peg, what Anthony, just to clarify, the law allows for the association to have a couple of different options to figure out how they want to fund themselves to right that ship moving forward. It's not like, oh crap, you guys, we're $10,000 short, everybody get checkbooks. It's no, we can pull over, make a plan. Correct me if I'm wrong, Anthony, right? There's a couple different options associations have to kind of figure out how they want to right that ship over a period of time so as to not create a financial hardship.
Yes. Yep.
And Sue was asking, how often does the capital fund, or the capital reserve study need to be completed?
Once the initial reserve fund is established, which should take place as soon as possible, the state requires that you revisit it and update it if necessary in 5-year intervals.
Okay, so almost consistent. Say your association was doing structural integrity and capital reserve. These things could be happening at the same time, and every 5 years we're renewing and adjusting going forward.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep. We recommend that you revisit it a little bit more than that, only because market forces are a little bit unpredictable. The cost of roofing might grow faster than anticipated, things like that. So if you revisit it more often, it'll give you opportunity to adjust your savings as needed to kind of catch up to inflation, or change things if there's the need for it.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, as I have seen, is many associations are not as well funded as they could be. And now they're just trying to figure out, okay, what do we do? How do we figure this out? What do we owe? And let's just right our ship going forward. And I think, guys, from a practical perspective, when we're negotiating our contracts on the buying and selling side of things, I think we're just going to be negotiating. There may be, some sort of a special assessment that's going to have to be paid. We're going to have to figure out between our buyers and sellers who's paying it, work it out so that we can move on and, get our transactions to go to closing. Chip had a question. I believe it is written to this. What's it say? I believe it's written to the state HOA needs to be working toward the funding, not necessarily fully. Yes, correct, Chip. They do not have to be fully funded as long as there's a couple different plans, and as long as they're working towards getting themselves funded and they're actively doing so, the state's okay with it. But again, from a compliance perspective, we really, it cracks me up that we create legislation and then now what? We don't know who's enforcing it. Like at the state level, nobody knows. And from the insurance perspective, you have your zoning officers, you have your construction officers. Nobody really knows. I've talked to mayors. Nobody really knows. And it's like, well, now what do we do? How do we go from here? And how do we be the ones that can be the source of information when we're not really, there still are so many unanswered questions. And now we have a law that's now supposed to be enforceable, and we don't know who's going to enforce it and how. Does anybody else have any other questions? I know we were, allowing for 2 hours. I want to make sure we're using our time well. I want to make sure everyone's crystal clear on what buildings are part of this, what's are not. Again, from a structural side, that depends. The ones that seem to have more concrete and masonry are the ones that we have to be concerned about. Podium construction, definitely want to be very concerned about. Traditional concrete full block, not so much with regular framing above. Let's see if Chip has a question here. And someone was asking, do we know if there's going to be any penalties in place? That's the whole problem. The state doesn't know. And Peg also, is a copy going to get sent to the state? It is our understanding that the association, the board of directors, is supposed to keep a copy of this in their file. And if it's ever asked of them, they have it to prepare. Once they have a copy of the reserve studies done, or the structural integrity report done, they are to disseminate those reports to their association members. And that's it. That's all that the law says. From there, we don't know what's supposed to happen from an enforcement perspective on any level. We genuinely do not know. And that's really why it gets a little bit strange. There's no requirement to send it to the state or to report it. Anthony, are you guys required to share this with anybody other than the person who paid for it?
No, just as you stated, when we develop one of these reports, we send it to our point of contact, which is usually the board president, and it's up to them to distribute it as necessary. Gotcha.
Yeah, it's interesting. Again, there's a lot of unknowns, but I felt going into the new year, this is a great opportunity for us to try to educate some of our clients. It's good talking points. It's important for us to know because a lot of our clients just don't know. And we now have to figure out how we can, go through our phones, call our sphere of influences, call our past clients, maybe call association presidents and say, hey, how are you guys addressing this? How are you working out? Are you professionally managed? And just try to spark some conversation. Does anybody have any other questions? I want to make sure that we're not missing anybody's questions. I want to make sure that you guys are crystal clear and that your time here has been, of value. And again, the purpose of our SURE agents helping agents is to collaborate in person. We want to all get together. We want to meet. We want to bounce ideas off of each other. We are not in competition with each other. We all have our own clients. We all have different people that we all talk to. We all vibe in different tribes, and that's totally okay. And a beautiful, good thing. I want to make sure that we all, are able to just have good information to talk about and to come of value. So Donna's asking, as agents, are we asking for the reserve fund study along with all the other documents? Yeah, Donna, you certainly can. And I would ask that in a more friendly, inquisitive kind of a way, because for maybe that listing agent, they may not even really be aware that the ask is coming and they might not even know what you're talking about. So yes, I think it's important, even quite frankly, as we're showing property, maybe it's not a bad idea to ask that listing agent, hey, do you have any idea where your association is on that structural reserve study and the capital reserve? Like, where are they on this? They may or may not know. And it's just, again, it's a great opportunity for us to maybe turn the corner and be the source of information gonna pop my glasses on so I can make sure I see this. Yes, you guys, if any of you want to drop your email in the chat, I will make sure we can send you a copy of the structural reserve study and the law as it has been written. I've read it a handful of times. It's super vague. It's legal, not mumbo jumbo. And we'll also make sure that we share a copy of Anthony's presentation with you. Again, our goal, guys, is to truly meet once a month and to ideally meet and collaborate in person. We're going to be meeting next February, the first Tuesday of the month at the Cape May County Library here in Cape May Courthouse on Mechanic Street. They have a presentation room downstairs. We're going to be meeting there going forward. That way it's an easy neutral location a lot of people can get to. And then from there, we can go ahead and out, maybe have lunch or continue to collaborate. If there are topics that you guys want to discuss, please let me know. If there is something that you are a rock star, that you are a superstar, something that you want to share, please let me know. I want to make sure that we are really including everybody. It's agents helping agents. Like I said, you are now part of the club. Thanks for joining. You might say, I don't really want to be in a club. Well, you're here now. Because again, the point is for us to collaborate and to really add value to each other. I stumble upon some really crazy off the wall things, and I really want to make sure that I can share that with all of you so that you can, share that with all of your clients. And I just want to make sure that you guys are getting, good value from me and from each other, because we all have lots to learn. Does anybody have anything else that they want to add? Or please make sure you put your email address in the chat so that we can really make sure to get everything from you. We want to make sure we can share with you. Palsy has a question. What about all those 3-story, 9-unit and wood? Okay, excellent. Paul, this is a great question. Palsy has a question. What about all those 3-story buildings that are either 9-unit or 12-unit associations? They're wood framing in the crest, or wood frame buildings in the crest with steel framing.
In that case, that would be a building with load-bearing steel, which is part of the structural assessment. I call it like the checklist. So that would require a structural investigation.
Paul, are you talking about think of I can't think of the names, like our Al Muchetti, Burt Morelli buildings that were all steel and all concrete, didn't really have much masonry, or didn't really have much framing construction. Paul, are those the ones that you're thinking of? If you're able to come off mic and answer, that would be fantastic. I just want to make sure we're answering your question correctly. Because yes, Anthony, I almost laughed out loud when you said that a lot of these buildings exist in the Wildwoods. I was like, yes, of course they do. Yes. Okay. Talking about all the D'Antonio buildings that were built in 2005 and 2006. Okay. Yeah, we had a lot of buildings that were, So if you've got steel in there, it's going to fall under it.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. If there's the main, simplest takeaway is concrete, masonry, steel, or a combination of those things.
Okay. Excellent. Yeah, we just want to, again, it's a lot to wrap our heads around, and we just really want to make sure that we have a really good understanding. Does anybody else have any other questions? Okay, Chip said anything that's built on a platform, and that's a great way to consider a platform not being a continuous masonry concrete block foundation.
Yep. Yep, that would be a good trigger for inclusion as well.
Okay, great. Well, awesome, everybody. Thank you all for your time. I so appreciate you. If you have any questions, please reach out to Anthony. Anthony has his contact information. You did provide your contact information in the chat, Anthony?
Yes, I put it in the chat, and it's at the top of the handout, which was distributed.
Awesome, perfect. Because I really want to make sure that everyone's clear. We actually have some agents here that are also second homeowner condo owners. So this is great for them, because then they can go back to their associations, and they can also maybe talk to their neighbors and help educate them. We just really wanted to make sure that we brought some good value to everybody. And please join us next Thursday, or next February, the first Tuesday of the month. We're going to meet in person. I'm going to be putting out a list of topics. I want you guys to participate and be involved and collaborate. And I want you guys to, again, it's all about collaboration and meeting in person. So thank you, everyone. If no one else has any other questions, I guess we could just kind of wrap it up.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Anthony, thank you again for taking our call. I so appreciate you. And again, I hope that we can meet and see you in person, or see you out in the field and be like, hey, I know that guy. I know what he's doing.
There you go. Yeah. Might see me floating around different condos.
Yes. So we see you on the street. He's friend, not foe.
Yeah, but thank you for the invitation. Hope I can be a point of support for everyone going into the future.
Yes, thank you so much. You certainly will be. I know we'll be leaning on you in the future, and I thank you for that. Again, thanks everybody for coming. We greatly appreciate you. If anybody has other questions or wants to stick around to ask anything or has any questions about AHA Club, I'm happy to answer. Again, I want to make sure everyone's included, that we have your contact information so that you can come and join again for next month.